Material safety data sheets, MSDS, were developed to inform millions of American workers of the potential hazards of handling and working with thousands of chemicals and other substances. They can be an important source for health and safety information relating to the use of a material or production. An MSDS is part of a warning system devised to include packaging warnings, training, and programs designed to create increased awareness surrounding the risks associated with the products you will be using. An MSDS is available for all welding electrodes and fluxes and may be obtained from welding distributors or the manufacturers. All Lincoln Electric MSDS are available online and are enclosed inside of each package of product manufactured. The MSDS format is standardized, so you can find specific information on each MSDS, no matter what company produces them. Let's review what a material safety data sheet tells you, section by section, with examples from an MSDS from Fleetweld 5P. Section 1, Identification. This section identifies the manufacturer of the product and gives the company's complete address and phone number. Product type is listed, for example. Covered electrode, also its AWS classification, E6010. Trade names may also appear. Section 2, Hazardous Materials. The ingredients of products are listed in this section. Included are the identification, CAS number, percentages of total electrode weight, and the threshold limit values, TLV, and permissible exposure limits, PEL, for each ingredient. These exposure limits are for airborne concentrations of materials to which nearly all workers may be exposed, day after day without harmful effects. The TLV and PEL numbers are primarily intended for industrial hygienists, but you should understand what they represent. Both the TLV and PEL relate to the measured weight, in milligrams, of welding fume per volume in cubic meters, to which you may be repeatedly exposed without adverse health effects. Ingredients thought to affect your health in small amounts have a smaller PEL or TLV number. For example, the TLV for iron oxide is 10 milligrams per cubic meter, while the TLV for manganese is 0.2 milligrams per cubic meter. In general terms, this means that it requires more ventilation or exhaust to control a worker's exposure to manganese than is needed to control exposure to iron oxide. The TLV is established by ACGIH, the Council of Governmental Industrial Hygienists. The PEL is established by the U.S. Occupational Health and Safety Administration, OSHA. Section 3, Fire. Explosion hazard data. Most electrodes are non-flammable or non-combustible. Technically, this means that they will not support combustion or release flammable vapors when exposed to heat or flame. But the welding arc and sparks can, of course, ignite combustibles and flammable products. An American Welding Society standard, Z49.1, Safety in Welding and Cutting, covers the hazards of fire and explosion in detail, and they are discussed in Module 3 of this DVD. You and your employer should be familiar with it. Instructions for obtaining a copy are included in Section 6 and 7 of the MSDS in this DVD and on the Lincoln Electric website. Very specific information is given in this section. For example, the maximum exposure guideline for general welding fume for Fleetweld 5P is 5 milligrams per cubic meter. The figure is to be used as a guide in the control of exposure to general welding fume and is not considered as a fine line between safe and dangerous conditions. The effects of overexposure list several possible effects upon your health, which may be caused by welding fumes and gases. Of course, fumes and gases can be dangerous to your health. Short-term overexposure, for instance, can cause dizziness, nausea, or irritation of the nose, throat, and eyes. Long-term overexposure to welding fumes can lead to siderosis or iron deposits in the lungs, which is not normally harmful but in large amounts may affect breathing generally. The potential health effects described on an MSDS vary depend upon what substances are in the product, and therefore the welding fume. Lincoln Electric MSDS forms also give emergency and first aid procedures which are very important but provide only initial guidance. Always call a doctor or local emergency squads as quickly as possible after an accident occurs. Review this section to be sure you or at least one of your coworkers can give the first aid treatment suggested. Learn CPR. See your local Red Cross chapter. Section 5.
This section describes the effects upon the material when it reacts with another material. In the case of welding electrodes, the reaction is caused by the welding process, and the result, other than the actual weld, is that some of the electrode ingredients and other materials, oils, coating, air, etc., react in the intense heat to produce welding fumes and gases. Since the reactions which take place are complicated and vary depending upon the situation, the fumes and gases also vary. The MSDS does list some byproducts normally a part of the fume. In the example below, Fleet Weld 5P, the fume would be primarily iron oxide, secondarily complex oxides of manganese, silicon, and sodium. Gases which are present at the arc, such as carbon monoxide and oxides of nitrogen, are identified. So this section tells the welder or industrial hygienist what is in the fume, obviously important. Sections 6 and 7 then follow on control measures and precautions. The purpose of this section is clear, and it, with the section on health hazard data, are the most meaningful for you. All information on the MSDS is for your benefit and information, but this section you must read and put into practice. Included are the paragraphs on ventilation, protective equipment and clothing, and disposal of partially used electrodes. The American Welding Society Z49.1 and OSHA General Industry Standard are referenced with addresses from which they can be obtained. This section duplicate some of the warning label printed on electrode and flux packaging. Hopefully, this section helps you to understand the format